Hi guys. It had been a Wednesday evening when I discovered the truth. A cold, silent realization that shattered everything I thought I knew about my wife, Sophia, and our marriage. She had always been my anchor, the person I trusted above all else. We had been together for over 10 years, weathering everything life threw at us. Deaths in the family, financial setbacks, the inevitable ups and downs. But nothing had prepared me for what I found that evening. I had come home early from work, something that wasn't entirely unusual. I was tired of the office grind and had decided to take the rest of the day off. I walked through the door and noticed Sophia's car in the driveway, which was odd because she'd mentioned going to the gym. As I entered the house, everything seemed quiet, too quiet. I called out for her but got no answer. It wasn't until I walked into the living room that I saw it. Her phone, lying on the couch, screen facing up. I wasn't one to snoop, but something about the way it sat there, the way it seemed to beckon me, made my heart skip a beat. I picked it up, checking for any missed calls or messages. That's when I saw it. The text message from Ryan. Ryan. I knew the name immediately. He was one of my colleagues, a young guy who had been working with us for a couple of years. I always thought he was a bit too friendly with Sophia, but I had never suspected anything more. Until now. The message read, "I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was incredible. We need to be careful though. Ethan's getting suspicious." My stomach dropped. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. The words on the screen burned into my mind. My brain raced to comprehend what I had just read, but it couldn't make sense of it. My wife, my Sophia, was having an affair. With Ryan, my colleague, my friend. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at the phone. My fingers trembled as I set it down on the couch. Every muscle in my body felt tight, as if my entire existence was being crushed by an invisible weight. How had I not seen this? How had she kept this from me? Was it just a fling? Or had I been living a lie for much longer than I realized? The door creaked behind me, and I turned around to see her standing in the hallway, her eyes wide with surprise. "Ethan, you're home early." I could feel the heat rising in my face. The anger, the confusion, the betrayal, it was all mixing together, a poisonous cocktail threatening to explode. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at her. She looked different somehow, as if she knew something was coming but wasn't sure how to face it. She looked guilty, but not in the way I expected. "I saw your phone," I managed to say, my voice cold, devoid of any warmth. I wasn't sure how to continue. How do you confront the woman you love, the woman you've spent more than a decade building a life with, about something like this? Her eyes flickered for a moment, then she looked away. She didn't deny it. "Ethan, I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice shaking slightly. It just did. Ryan and I. "Stop," I cut her off. My voice was sharp, like a knife cutting through the tension that had suddenly filled the room. "I don't want to hear it." She opened her mouth, probably to apologize, but I couldn't take it. I had to walk away. I stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know what I was doing. My head was spinning, my thoughts a blur. But the one thing I did know was that I couldn't stay in this house with her anymore, not like this. Not with this hanging over us. I grabbed my coat and left. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get out. The city felt different that night, distant, unfamiliar, cold. I wandered aimlessly through the streets, my mind racing, replaying the conversation, the messages, the look on her face when she finally confessed. I didn't even know if she had truly admitted to everything, but the truth was undeniable. I didn't go back that night. I couldn't. I stayed in a hotel, my phone on silent, hoping for some peace, but it never came. My thoughts were consumed by the betrayal. I kept asking myself how I had missed it, how I hadn't seen the signs. There had been late nights at work, mysterious text messages, a sudden distance between us. But I'd chalked it all up to the pressures of life, thinking nothing of it. The next morning, I returned home, determined to get answers. But nothing could prepare me for the conversation that awaited. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived, a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked up as I walked in, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. For a moment, I almost felt pity for her. But then I remembered everything, her lies, her betrayal, and that feeling quickly vanished. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said, her voice soft. "I should have told you. I never meant to hurt you." I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. I wanted to scream, to yell, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at her, feeling nothing but emptiness. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophia hesitated. Her hands fidgeted nervously with the edge of her coffee cup. "I don't know." I was confused, Ethan. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't happy, and he was there, offering me something different. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet of the room. So this was just about something different? Just about a distraction? She flinched at my words, but didn't say anything. There was nothing she could say that would make this right. I took a deep breath, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "I can't do this anymore, Sophia. I can't live like this. You've broken my trust in a way that I don't know if I can ever fix. And I don't want to try." She stared at me in shock, as if she couldn't understand why I was making this decision. "Ethan, please don't say that. I'll do anything." But I was already walking away. "It's too late. I've already made up my mind." I went to the lawyer's office the next day. The divorce papers were drawn up quickly. I didn't care about the details, the custody arrangements, or the finances. I just wanted out. I wanted peace. The days that followed were a blur. Sophia tried to talk to me, tried to convince me to give her a second chance, but there was nothing left to say. The betrayal was too deep, the hurt too raw. I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgusted. I moved into an apartment downtown, far from the life I had known. I didn't tell anyone about the divorce at first. No family, no friends. I didn't want to hear their judgment or their pity. I just needed space to think. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. It wasn't messy, but it was final. Sophia and I were no longer tied together in any way. But the aftermath lingered. The anger, the hurt, the unanswered questions. I never got to know why it happened. I never got the full story. In the end, the only thing I could do was move on. And maybe, eventually, I'd heal. But that day, the day I found out the truth, would stay with me forever. I didn't think it would happen this fast. I didn't think I would make it happen this fast. But the day after the confrontation, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers with a level of calm I hadn't expected from myself. My hands were steady as I signed each line, each letter of my name feeling heavier than the last. It was final. There was no turning back. Sophia had been in and out of the house the last couple of days, trying to get me to talk, offering apologies that didn't feel real anymore. I couldn't look at her the same way. I couldn't hear the regret in her voice without wondering if it was just another performance. The night I found the messages, the look in her eyes as she tried to justify what had happened, it all played in my mind like a broken record. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't forget the way she betrayed me with someone I trusted, someone I called a friend. The pain wasn't just from the affair. It was from how easily everything had fallen apart. I had tried to hold on to what we had, but I wasn't going to live in this suffocating limbo forever. She texted me that morning, asking if we could sit down, talk things through. I didn't reply immediately. I didn't know what to say anymore. But I already had my answer. I was done. The lawyer's office had been a blur. It took barely 24 hours to finalize the paperwork, and I didn't hesitate. Sophia hadn't changed. The few times she tried to reach out, I felt nothing but indifference. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way I was when I first found out. It wasn't about vengeance anymore, or even closure. It was just the end. The divorce papers sat on the table now, signed, witnessed, and ready to be filed. I could almost hear her voice, soft and pleading, in the back of my mind. "Ethan, please. Please don't do this." But I knew what would come after. She'd try to convince me. She'd promise things would change. She'd cry, she'd beg, and maybe she'd blame me for the way things turned out. But I knew what I had to do. I had seen the truth, and it had torn something inside me that couldn't be fixed. The doorbell rang just as I finished packing the last of my things into boxes. I wasn't in the mood to deal with her again, but I knew it was coming. I opened the door, and there she was, standing in the doorway. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face pale, as if she hadn't slept in days. She looked like the woman I had once loved, but now she felt like a stranger to me. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaking. I nodded, stepping aside to let her in, though my insides churned at the thought of it. She wasn't crying like she had the night I caught her. There was no real sorrow in her face, just desperation. And I knew that desperation wasn't for me. It was for the life we had built together, the comfortable, predictable routine. "I've been thinking," she began, sitting on the couch, looking up at me as if she were waiting for me to ask her how she was feeling. But I couldn't bring myself to care about that anymore. "What have you been thinking about, Sophia?" My voice was cold, flat. There was no tenderness in it anymore. I'd run out of it. "I don't want to lose you," she said softly, almost pleading. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've messed up. But I want to fix this. Please give me another chance. I'll do anything. We can go to therapy, we can work through this. We can—" "No, Sophia." I interrupted her. I didn't want to hear any more. Not the promises, not the desperation. None of it. You don't get to fix this with words. Words don't mean anything anymore. You've had your chance. Her face faltered. There was a slight tremble in her lips as she looked at me, waiting for something. Maybe she was still waiting for me to change my mind, to tell her it would be okay. But I wasn't going to lie to her anymore. I wasn't going to drag this out. "You're right," she said after a long pause, and for the first time, I saw something that resembled regret in her eyes. It wasn't a hopeful kind of regret. It was an acceptance of what she had done and what she had lost. "I don't deserve another chance. I've ruined everything. I'm sorry." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but it didn't change anything. It couldn't undo the damage. "I don't want to be here anymore. I've tried to make this work, Sophia. I've been trying for a long time, but nothing changes. I can't keep living like this." She blinked rapidly, the tears welling up in her eyes again. "Please don't do this, Ethan. Please. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm willing to change. I will change. Just don't leave me." It was like a wave crashing against a wall. I could see her breaking, and yet, I felt nothing. I was already gone. The man she had known, the one who might have taken her back after all this, the one who might have believed in second chances, wasn't standing in front of her anymore. I had died inside when I found out the truth. I'm already gone, Sophia. Mentally, emotionally, it's all gone. I'm sorry, but I can't keep living in this lie with you. I'm filing the divorce papers. It's over. Her face twisted with disbelief, and for a moment, I almost thought she might collapse. But then something shifted. She took a shaky breath, wiped her face, and stood up. "So that's it? Just like that? You've made your decision?" Her voice was quieter now, but there was an edge to it. "Just like that," I replied. I could feel the finality of it settling in my chest. There was no turning back, no way to undo the decision that had already been made. It had been made the moment I found those texts, the moment I realized that I couldn't live in this betrayal any longer. She didn't say anything more after that. She just stood there, looking at me with a mix of confusion, regret, and anger. I didn't blame her for being angry. I would have been too. But it didn't matter. I was done. "Goodbye, Sophia," I said, my voice steady. And that was it. I walked out, leaving behind the house, the memories, the shattered pieces of a life that had once been whole. As I stepped outside into the cool air, I felt something shift in me. It wasn't relief, not yet. But it was the beginning of something new. Something that would take time, but it was mine to rebuild. And that was the only thing that mattered now. Sophia moved across the hall, just a few doors down from the apartment I had rented in the building. I knew it would happen. After everything, after the affair with Ryan and the divorce, she wasn't going to stay here. I could almost hear the conversation she had with him before she made the decision. She had no one else to turn to. No one who would understand, no one who would offer a place to hide from the wreckage of her life. So, she moved in with him just as I knew she would. At first, it seemed like everything was going according to her plan. She'd found refuge in Ryan's arms, a soft place to land after everything fell apart. He had been her escape, her comfort, the man who filled the hole she had created in our marriage. They shared meals, spent nights together, and probably tried to convince themselves that everything was fine, that this was the new chapter they both needed. But I knew, even if I wasn't there to witness it, that something was off. It wasn't the same. Not with Ryan, not with anyone. Sophia had always been someone who sought stability, who craved security, even if she didn't realize it. Ryan wasn't the answer she thought he would be. I could tell when I ran into her in the hallway a few weeks later. She had that look in her eyes, the same one she had when she tried to justify the affair. Conflicted, unsure, but now with an added layer of guilt. She barely looked at me, avoiding eye contact as she passed. Her hair was different, shorter, a bit more edgy, but the change didn't make her look stronger. It made her look lost. And in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to feel anything for her. There was no satisfaction in seeing her stumble. I didn't want her to be hurt. I wanted her to feel the weight of the choices she made. Her relationship with Ryan, I could see, wasn't as fulfilling as she had hoped. Maybe it was the guilt that hung over her, the knowledge that she had destroyed something good to pursue a brief fling. Maybe it was the reality of what she had thrown away, the marriage, the family, the life she and I had built together. Or maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to realize that Ryan was just a distraction, a temporary fix for the emptiness inside her. He wasn't Ethan. He wasn't the man who had stood by her through thick and thin, the man who had loved her despite everything. Ryan didn't have that depth. He was just convenient. I heard from a few of our old mutual friends that she seemed off around Ryan. She didn't seem happy in the way she had expected. She was irritable, distracted, restless. When she wasn't with him, she was lost in thought, pacing around her apartment, texting me when I wasn't looking. Those texts came often, always with apologies, always with the same pleading tone. I miss you, Ethan. I made a mistake. Please don't hate me. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. Part of me wanted to answer her, to tell her that what she had done hurt me more than I could explain. To tell her that no apology could undo the damage. But I'd made my decision. I wasn't going back. As the weeks passed, it became clearer to me that Sophia was starting to unravel. The texts kept coming, but they started to change. I don't know what I want anymore. Ryan's not like you. He's different. I don't know who I am without you. These weren't messages of someone who had found solace in her new life. These were the words of a woman who was lost, confused, and broken. Ryan, for all his confidence and charm, wasn't the answer to her problems. He wasn't the person who could fix the emptiness inside her. And Sophia, no matter how many times she tried to convince herself otherwise, wasn't the same woman I had married. The affair had changed her, just as it had changed me. One night, I received a message that was different from the others. It came late, just as I was about to go to bed. She asked if we could meet. Just to talk, she said. I need to see you. I can't stop thinking about everything. For a second, I thought about it. I thought about what it would be like to see her again, to hear her voice, to feel the tension in the air as we sat in silence. But I didn't want to fall into that trap again. I didn't want to believe the promises she'd make, the things she'd say to pull me back into the same cycle of pain. I couldn't do it. I never replied to her message. The next morning, I ran into Ryan in the building's parking garage. He looked at me like I was the one who had wronged him. He had this smug look on his face, as though everything was going his way, as though he had won some kind of prize. It disgusted me. But I didn't say anything to him. I didn't need to. The truth was already clear. He wasn't the answer. Sophia had chosen him, but she hadn't found what she was looking for. Weeks passed, and I could feel the weight of the situation sinking deeper into her. Ryan wasn't the man she thought he was. He wasn't capable of offering her the stability she needed. He was more like a temporary escape, a crutch for her wounded ego, a distraction from the mess she'd created. But even he couldn't fill the void. Sophia's messages grew more desperate. I can't stop thinking about you, Ethan. I don't know how to fix this. I miss what we had. She was pleading for something she couldn't have, something she'd destroyed with her own hands. But I was different now. I was beyond her. I had moved on. Every message, every call, every attempt to reconnect was a reminder of how deeply she had hurt me. I didn't need her anymore. I had learned to live without her. And as much as it hurt to admit, I had learned to live without the woman I once thought I couldn't survive without. The truth was, Sophia wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. We were two people trapped in the aftermath of a choice that couldn't be undone. And though she might have thought moving in with Ryan would bring her happiness, it only deepened her confusion. She had wanted the security I gave her, the love I offered, but it was too late now. I was done waiting for her to figure it out. I was done being her backup. I couldn't be her fix anymore. The news came out of nowhere. I couldn't have predicted it, no matter how hard I tried. I heard it from a mutual acquaintance, someone who still kept in touch with Sophia, someone who didn't know I had already moved on. The details were murky at first, and I didn't want to believe it, but when I ran into Sophia a week later in the building hallway, it became undeniable. She was standing there, looking more disheveled than usual, her face pale. She didn't greet me, didn't try to hide what she was feeling. Instead, she looked straight at me with a strange mix of fear and uncertainty, as if she were waiting for me to say something, anything, to break the silence. I didn't know what to say, but I could tell something was wrong. Her eyes, usually so guarded, were wide open, and there was an almost raw vulnerability to her that I hadn't seen before. I didn't think she had anything else to lose, but now, standing there in front of me, she was completely exposed. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but it hit me like a punch to the stomach. The words felt foreign coming from her, as if she had said them too many times in her head, trying to prepare herself for the reality of what it meant. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, everything I had spent months trying to forget, came rushing back. The affair, the betrayal, the finality of the divorce, it all collided in that one moment. My mind raced. Pregnant? With Ryan's child? I stared at her, trying to make sense of it all. She wasn't on birth control. I knew that. She had stopped taking it months ago, long before I ever found out about her affair with Ryan. She had told me that she wanted to have a baby eventually, but we hadn't really talked about it. Now, it seemed like fate had made the decision for her. She had never wanted children with me, not like this, not when we were in a stable place. But with Ryan? That was different. He was the escape. He was the man who helped her forget. He was the man she had turned to when she couldn't face the truth. "You're pregnant?" I repeated, still trying to make sense of the words coming out of her mouth. "With Ryan's child?" Sophia nodded, her eyes downcast. There was a weight in her voice when she spoke next. "I know I messed up, Ethan. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever fix, but this is real. It's happening." I was in shock. I didn't know how to process it. There was a part of me that wanted to scream at her, to accuse her of making this mess worse, of digging a hole she couldn't climb out of. But I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to. It felt like all the anger and resentment I had felt towards her over the past months suddenly drained out of me. What was left was confusion, sadness, and an odd, unsettling sense of pity. "How?" I asked, feeling stupid the second the question left my lips. It was obvious how. She had been sleeping with Ryan for months. But it felt surreal, like this situation couldn't possibly be real. Sophia was pregnant with another man's child. A man who had been my friend, someone I had trusted, someone I had known for years. "I don't know," she whispered, still not looking me in the eye. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't on birth control. I didn't plan for any of this. But I don't even know what to do." I looked at her, seeing the fear in her eyes. The same fear that I had seen in her when I first found out about the affair. But this time, it wasn't just about our marriage falling apart. It was about the future. It was about her choices, the consequences, the reality that now there was a life inside her, one that she couldn't just walk away from. "You need to figure this out," I said flatly, my voice colder than I intended. "You need to figure out what you're going to do, because I'm not going to be part of this. I'm not going to pretend like everything's okay, like I can just step back into your life. This is between you and Ryan. This has nothing to do with me anymore." I could see the pain in her eyes, the way she clenched her fists at her sides. She wanted to say something, wanted to plead with me again, but I couldn't bear it. I had already done this. I had already given her everything, my trust, my heart, and she had shattered it. She had shattered me. And now she was pregnant. I turned and walked away from her, without another word. I didn't know what else to say. What could I say? She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. That night, I lay in bed, the room dark, the silence thick and suffocating. My mind kept returning to her, to Ryan, to the baby she was carrying. The thought of it gnawed at me, the realization that she had moved on, that she was building a future with someone else, someone who wasn't me. I had wanted to move on, to leave her behind and never look back. But now, with this news, everything felt even more complicated. It wasn't just about us anymore. There was a child involved. I thought about Sophia, about how she must have felt. Was she happy? Was she scared? Did she even know what she wanted? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. She hadn't wanted this for herself. Not like this. The next day, I ran into Ryan. He looked different. It wasn't the cocky, self-assured man I had known. This time, he looked uneasy, as if he had been carrying some heavy burden that was too much for him to handle. Maybe it was the same weight I had felt when I first found out about their affair. The guilt, the shame, the reality that everything had changed. We didn't speak. I didn't need to. The silence between us was thick enough to say everything that needed to be said. Ryan had gotten what he wanted, but it wasn't exactly a prize. Sophia's pregnancy wasn't a victory. It was a complication, a mess. Sophia was carrying his child, but there was no happiness in her face, no joy in her voice when she spoke of it. She was confused, torn between her guilt over what she had done to me and the reality of what this meant for her future. Ryan was the man who had helped her escape, but he wasn't the man she could rely on to fix things. I didn't know what the future held for Sophia, for me, for Ryan, or for this child. All I knew was that the life I had once envisioned for myself, the life with her, was gone. What came next, I couldn't even begin to predict. Ryan and I hadn't spoken in weeks, not since I ran into him in the parking garage. He had that smug look on his face, like he'd won some prize. The truth was, he wasn't winning anything. Not really. The situation was far more complicated than he could have imagined when he first got involved with Sophia. I didn't expect Ryan to change overnight. I knew the kind of guy he was. He was charming, a little reckless, always living in the moment, never really thinking about the consequences of his actions. But the news that Sophia was pregnant, that they were going to have a child together, changed things. At first, I thought it might just be one more complication, another problem for them to ignore until it blew up in their faces. But as the weeks went on, I began to notice a shift in Ryan. He wasn't the same confident, carefree guy he had been before. I heard it from a mutual friend, a guy who had known Ryan for years. Ryan wasn't excited about the pregnancy, not in the way he should have been. At least, that's what our friend had told me. He wasn't showing up at Sophia's apartment with flowers or baby clothes or anything that even remotely resembled the idea of building a family. Instead, Ryan seemed distant, almost withdrawn. He wasn't sure if he wanted the baby. He wasn't sure if he wanted any of it. He had been blindsided by the news, and it was starting to show. When I saw him again a few weeks later at a bar, the tension between us was palpable. We avoided each other for a long time, both of us pretending that nothing had changed. But it had. I could see it in his face. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by something else, something that looked a lot like confusion. "Hey," Ryan said, sitting down next to me at the bar. His voice was quieter than usual, like he wasn't sure what to say, like he didn't even know what to feel. "We need to talk." I had no intention of talking to him. What was there left to say? But I gave him a look, the kind of look that said I wasn't in the mood for games. "I know things are complicated," he continued, his eyes downcast as he stirred his drink. "I don't even know how to start. You're probably pissed at me, and you have every right to be." I didn't say anything. I wasn't pissed. I didn't have the energy for it anymore. We'd both made our choices, and now we had to live with the consequences. The only thing left to feel was a strange sense of pity for him. "You heard about the baby?" he asked, his eyes finally meeting mine. "I heard," I said flatly, not looking at him. He nodded, running a hand through his hair, clearly lost in thought. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I never thought I'd be in this situation. You know how I am? I'm not the kind of guy who gets attached. Especially not to someone like Sophia. I didn't respond. What could I say? I knew exactly what he meant. I had known Ryan for long enough to understand that he was never interested in the kind of life that involved settling down, raising a family. He was always more about the chase, the thrill, the conquest. Sophia, with all her baggage, with all her mess, didn't fit into that world. But now, she was pregnant. And whether he liked it or not, Ryan was about to be a father. You're gonna be a dad, I said, finally meeting his gaze. You've got a kid on the way, man. Whether you want it or not. Ryan's expression darkened at the mention of it. I didn't ask for this. You know that, right? I didn't plan for it. I wasn't even thinking about it. But now, his voice trailed off as he looked at the glass in his hand, as if searching for an answer in the bottom of it. It's not about what you wanted, I said, my voice low. It's about what's happening. What you made happen. You've got a child coming into the world, and it's not going to disappear just because you're not ready for it. Ryan ran his fingers through his hair again, looking more stressed than I had ever seen him. I don't even know if I want this baby, he muttered. I don't know if I'm ready to be a dad. And I'm sure as hell not sure if I'm ready to be with her. I was surprised by his honesty. I expected him to put on a front, to act like he had everything under control. But he didn't. For the first time, he seemed genuinely lost. You're scared, I said, more to myself than to him. But Ryan heard it. Yeah, he admitted. I am. I didn't think it would happen like this. I didn't think I'd be in this situation with her. I thought it was just gonna be fun, you know? No strings, just a fling. And now, he paused, shaking his head as if the whole thing was too much to process. Now there's a baby. And it's all on me. And I'm not sure I'm the guy who can handle it. The vulnerability in his voice hit me harder than I expected. Maybe I had underestimated him. Maybe he wasn't the same guy I had thought he was. Maybe deep down he did care. Maybe he was scared for all the right reasons. You're gonna figure it out, Ryan, I said, my voice softening. You're gonna have to. This isn't about you and her anymore. It's about the kid. And you're not gonna be able to walk away from that. He didn't reply, but I could see that something was clicking in his mind. I wasn't sure what would come of it, whether he would rise to the occasion or whether he'd keep running away from responsibility. But I knew one thing for sure, he was going to have to face it, whether he was ready or not. The rest of the night passed in a blur. We didn't say much more. There was no need to. We both knew where we stood. Ryan was going to be a father, and his relationship with Sophia was about to change in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. But as I left the bar, walking into the cold night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. I had moved on. I was done with all of it. Sophia, Ryan, the baby, they were tangled in their own mess, and I wasn't going to get caught up in it again. Ryan had his own battles to fight now. And for the first time in months, I felt free. Free from her, free from him, free from the past. What came next, I had no idea. But I knew one thing. It was no longer my problem. Goodbye.